I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Hello, everyone. It's Rachel, and this is Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I hope everyone is doing well. I was going to say wonderful, but again, we're still about a year, I think tomorrow, into this pandemic. So understand if you are not feeling wonderful, though the weather is getting nicer and spring really is around the corner. So things are looking up. Tomorrow, actually, March 13th is the 1-year anniversary of the last day that I think a lot of people spent in the office. So pretty crazy marker there. But again, starting to feel a little bit of hope, and I hope that you all are too. I am going to start off with a listener question. Yay. Love listener questions. This one came through email, winedine@allportsopen.com. Send them my way. And I like this question because it's a dating question. I feel like a lot of the content that we've had recently has been very focused on like relationships and sex, which of course is great, but there's a whole other component that I want to cover that's dating. So let's get into it. And here is the question. Okay. They say, how did you define the relationship with your boyfriend? How do you think people should define the relationship? And they go on to say, I've been dating someone for 4 months and I want to know what we're doing, especially now because pandemic. Okay, I guess there's a 3-part answer to this question. The first question was, how did you define the relationship with your boyfriend? So we had been dating for about 3 or 4 months. I think that's kind of around the time when people start to get curious/antsy to get a sense of the trajectory of the relationship. And, because I had, shall we say, broken all of my rules on our first date and we had gotten physical so quickly, I wasn't sure what his headspace was, if we were just kind of fooling around or if, there were actual feelings there that could make this something more than just hooking up. So I kind of wanted to get a sense of that. And also, I wanted to make sure that we were sleeping together exclusively because for my own, sexual health, I wanted to know that. And also, I knew that if I got a sense of that, then I would get a sense of, where his head was at for the former question of what this could be eventually at some point. So I didn't go in necessarily wanting a label right then and there, but I did kind of want to get a sense of how he saw me, if it was just as this girl he was hooking up with or if it was there was a potential for something more there. So we were at a bar and I just kind of sat across the table from him and said, so what's this thing we're doing? And he looked at me like a deer in the headlights, and I was just like, well, I don't know, are we dating? And I said, I don't know, it's kind of what I'm wondering, what I'm asking you. And he was like, well, am I your boyfriend? I was like, I don't know. And we eventually awkwardly kind of settled on yes. Not the way I would do it differently if I were to do it over again. But you know what? Ultimately, it all worked out. And he even said later that he's glad that I pushed the conversation when I did because he could have definitely just seen himself obliviously never bringing it up, and because I am who I am, I could have gotten really anxious and one or both of us could have ruined it just by not communicating that sooner. So it's a good thing that we did. And not how I would have wanted that, not how I would do it now, but you know what, at the end of the day, got the answer. So the next part of the question, how do you think people should define the relationship? And then the third part is kind of about how you do this in a pandemic. And I hate to say this, but the answer is so different between part 2 and part 3. So how, in normal times, how does one define the relationship? In a perfect world, I don't think it should even be necessary. I think it should be a situation where you're increasingly spending more time together. You're getting to meet their friends. All these little kind of actions that they do happen where it kind of, you're going on this like escalator together, getting like closer to relationship status. These different things, meeting friends, talking about making future plans. These are all, I hate the term signs, but they're all kind of signs that things are going in the right direction here. And eventually, you know, the idea would be that your partner introduces you as their boyfriend or girlfriend, and you're just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess that's what we are. But I know that that's not always how it is. And I know, unfortunately, in like cis relationships, this is a rather gendered thing of women kind of wondering where they're at, and you know, the guys are frequently seen as trying to avoid putting a label on at all costs, etc., etc. That's a whole other conversation, but how to do it is where we're at. Again, in a perfect world, you wouldn't have to. It would become very clear. And I think that if I hadn't started sleeping with my partner so quickly, that I may have been more comfortable just riding it out and seeing what was happening. He did tell me that at that point I was the only person he was seeing, so we would have gotten there eventually. I just made it happen sooner. But I mean, there's always asking very frankly, or just saying, hey, just so you know, I'm not really interested in seeing other people. I don't know if you're ready to have that conversation yet. If you're not, that's totally okay, but I just wanted you to know where I was at. I'm 30. I'm almost 31. Maybe this wouldn't work if, you know, you're in your 20s still. But I'm so much more about the upfront. The other option, and what I have been guilty of doing in the past, is alluding to the fact that other people are interested and seeing that reaction. Very common thing to do. I could even say, oh, you know, you could allude to a date, or, you know, the app or whatever that you met on, just to gauge that reaction. Again, where I'm at right now, I have no patience for that, but it is an option. Yeah, so there's playing it cool and kind of feeling it out while following the signs. There is having an upfront conversation, and then there's kind of dipping your toe in the water, and testing, I guess, which I don't particularly like, but it is what it is, to see what the reaction is. And yeah, I mean, hopefully it goes well, no matter how you bring it up, right? However, in COVID times, I would say that this is completely different. Forget everything that I just said. Because this goes not just for people that you are dating, if you are dating right now, and if you're not, that's totally okay too. This should go for whoever you're potted up with. You should ask them to be transparent, and you should be transparent with them about what you're doing. Because just because you consider some people your pod doesn't mean that they don't have some other people that they consider in their pod, etc. And I mean, this disease is very much like an STI, in which if you interact with one person, you're basically interacting with everybody that they've breathed on and with. So definitely important to be transparent in all areas of your life with whoever you are hanging out with. And I think that goes with dating as well. I know that a lot of people are becoming more serious faster in pandemic times, just because it's easier, than seeing multiple people having multiple outside dates, or, they kind of find themselves in situationships, and that's okay too. But yeah, I would say that in pandemic times, upfront, honest. And it's not because you're trying to trick them into labeling something sooner than they're ready or anything like that. And if that is your reason, maybe switch around your thinking on that a little bit. This is about your health and the people that you're potted up with, their health. So just to ask, if you're seeing other people, that's fine. But I would like to know and be transparent about it so that I can make my own decisions about my life. And, maybe they're just having outdoor dates with people, which is different than inside dates. So, especially now, transparency, I think, is the way to go. Hopefully, maybe we'll go back to the way it was before. Maybe not for a while, but who knows? I have a theory that the pandemic could be good in some ways for not the dating industry, but just for dating in general in terms of intimacy and transparency. So that is an intro for another time, though. So we're about to get into a conversation with my guest, Scarlett, who just the most beautiful human with the most beautiful soul. I loved talking to her. I just wanted to give a really quick little content warning. We do not go into detail, but please note that in this episode, we do allude to a history of abuse. So that is in this conversation. Again, it's not detailed. Don't go into anything super intense, but it's mentioned. So just so you know. All right, everybody, rate, review, subscribe. We have a YouTube now. Go check out the YouTube channel, subscribe to that. And that's it from me. And please enjoy my conversation with the absolutely divine Scarlett.
What is it, honey?
It's that darn ghost again. He just won't leave us alone. I guess we're just going to have to move.
No, wait. Don't worry. We're not moving. He is.
Who are you going to call?
Blockbusters. Actually, we know nothing about catching ghosts other than what we saw in that old cartoon. But if you want a podcast where we talk about film, TV, random tangents that leave you wondering what the hell was that all about, and the occasional nugget of wisdom, then we're the ones for you. And as you act now, you can listen to our entire back catalogue for free.
Did you say free?
Yes, I did. So go now to your nearest podcatching device, shake off the ectoplasm, and download us today. Warning, listening to Blockbusters can lead to stomach cramps from laughing, headaches from attempting to remember what tangent they went on this time, and a worn-out section of your device's screen/keyboard as you smash the replay button over and over until the next episode arrives. If your Blockbusters episode lasts longer than 4 hours, tell your doctor so he can listen as well.
Hi, everyone. We are back, and I am here with my friend Scarlett. How are you today, Scarlett?
I'm well, thanks, Rachel. How are you?
I'm doing well. I said this before we started recording, but I will say off the bat that I feel like I already know Scarlett because we have recorded an episode already. We had technical difficulties, so we'll never see the light of day. But we had a really nice chat. It was really nice getting to know you.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you again for sure.
Yeah, so we'll cover some of the same things. Maybe some things will be different. We'll see. But so our topic that we're going to be talking about today is overall just like in owning sexuality.
Yeah, that has been a struggle for me for a long time and something I'm finally learning how to do. And it's a really positive experience.
Okay, well, let's start, I guess, like tell us about who you are. Where did this journey start? I know that you are married. Tell us about, how that relationship started, etc.
Yeah. So, growing up, I had a unique childhood. I mean, I guess it's not that unique. A lot of people go through some of the same things I went through. A lot of abuse, neglect, abandonment, things like that. Not the most positive environment. So I was always pretty solitary as far as like my family life goes. And I don't know, it's hard to say if things would have been different otherwise, but I didn't really have anybody in my life that like had the talk with me or kind of helped introduce me to sexuality in any way, shape, or form outside of like a short, half-hour middle school sex ed class. So
yes,
I struggled for a long time, and I really did not know how to embrace that part of myself, even though I'm sure literally any other human, I certainly had sexual attraction and desires, but I didn't know how to deal with those things. So I just kind of pretended they weren't there. Mm-hmm. I considered myself abstinent, and it was, I would say it was for like morality reasons, but realistically, I think it was fear. I just didn't know how to handle the idea of intimacy, and it frightened me. So I just rolled with it. I met my husband when I was pretty young, about 19, and he was one of the first people that I could imagine having a sexual relationship with at some point, because I trusted him. I just immediately felt connected to him. I immediately started to trust him. He's been amazing. He's absolutely my rock, my best friend, my favorite person. And it's kind of funny, as we'll talk about, when we're going through some of these new developments in my life, he actually, because of my background, I did have a little bit of sexual abuse, not so much as a child, but just a couple of situations. And as those things happened, my husband knows about them and was always very aware of, my history of physical and sexual abuse. And so he was always cautious. And I think he also had to really kind of tamp down his sexuality and interest in things for fear of hurting or triggering me in any way, which I love him for being so considerate. But we met at a restaurant. I knew right away that I wanted to spend a lot more time with him. And it has been such a cool experience growing with him. We've been together for about 15 years now, and
that's such a long time.
It feels like forever and no time at all at once.
Yeah, because you guys were pretty young at that point, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So he was only a few years older than me. I was 19. He was in his mid-20s, and neither of us had a whole lot of sexual experience outside of, what we shared, although he'd had some, online chat room gaming kind of stuff. Meanwhile, I had no idea what was happening at any given time in my life. But, but that said, he definitely, he was still very young. I was still very young. We were both pretty inexperienced. But that said, I guess I like to think of us as like one of the success stories where we found each other and we made it work, and we're still together and still very happy. Like, that hasn't changed.
And you're growing together. And I think that people have a lot of ways that they like to judge how successful a marriage or relationship is. But I don't know, I think if you're growing together, then that's great.
Right. What could be better than that? Like, you're never a whole and perfect person in any marriage. Like, it's never this idealistic, you never fight, you always get along, you're always on the same page. Like, you have to be willing to grow and compromise and change over time, because I can't imagine anybody is the same person they were 10 years ago.
Definitely not. Hopefully not, right?
Right.
Hopefully we've altered and changed and had experiences that, make us want to change and be better. So that's incredible. 15 years. Wow.
That's crazy.
And it really is. So, okay. So one of the things, talk to me about the process of kind of coming to terms with this within yourself, and maybe, with a therapist, and then what that process was like to talk to him about it.
Yeah. So, the past few months of my life have been very, very different. I sort of hit this, and everybody goes through at least a couple of these in their lifetimes, but I definitely had like a mini identity crisis. I started to panic about am I the person that I want to be? Am I, the whole person that I should be? And I kind of came to the realization that there were definitely some pieces of me that were missing, or that I hadn't really either identified or addressed in any way. And so one of the first components of that was realizing that I'm bisexual. And like I mentioned, my husband and I got together when I was very, very young. I dated before that, but,
Sure.
I was definitely in the headspace of that compulsory heterosexuality, and not really even considering the fact that it could be anything different than that. So I can't say I ever had those experiences where I experimented or, got a chance to date women. But I kind of came to this realization a couple of months ago, and like one of the biggest pieces was realizing like all of the things that I see in women that are things that I would normally have been jealous of, right? Like, oh my gosh, she's so pretty. She's got such gorgeous hair, beautiful eyes, such a good smile, great body, whatever. I was projecting jealousy in place of attraction. Right.
That's so astute of you.
You know, it was a really strange realization to come to, and it has completely changed my mindset. I think one of the best parts about it is that I have had so much better success in building my own confidence. Instead of comparing myself to these other women that I think are so beautiful and perfect, I'm recognizing I am who I am. I don't have to look like them. I can just see them for who they are rather than making that comparison. So huge mental shift. And honestly, one of the first questions I asked myself was, I'm happily married. Does it even matter that I'm bi? Like, do I even need to address this? Do I say anything? Do I just suck it up and pretend it's not even a thing? Like, why would I take on this label? Should I? Do I have a right to it? You know, and there's a lot of biphobic and bi-erasure elements even in the LGBT community. So
Definitely.
It was a huge step outside of my comfort zone. There was definitely a lot of fear and a lot of self-doubt, but I am so glad I owned it, if for no other reason than A, that I feel like a complete person now. I have addressed this part of myself that I, you know, had previously ignored. But B, like, honestly, the confidence boost, being able to respect myself in a different way because I'm not making those comparisons, that has been so life-changing and life-affirming for me. It's absolutely wonderful.
That's amazing. And it does matter, right? Because ultimately, regardless of whether you act on it or not, it's a part of who you are.
Right. And I think that we are all entitled to own every piece of ourselves. We're all entitled to whatever label feels most comfortable for us if we choose to label ourselves. And it's okay to not do that as well. But, you know, just because I haven't had a lot of that experience, I think that if I were to pretend that didn't matter somehow, that really reduces the strength that it takes to accept that label. I think it really reduces the, the pride that people should be taking in who they are as a person. And I think it, like, in some ways kind of diminishes other people's experience as well, just because if I'm saying, oh, well, I don't have a right to that label, what about other people in my position?
Exactly.
And I have seen online so many other people who are in the exact same situation. I realized I'm also attracted to women. I'm married. I don't really intend to change that. I'm happy in my relationship, but do I have a right to this? And realistically, we should all have a right to our own choices, our own labels, our own bodies, our own minds. And
Absolutely.
So that's been really cool.
It's sad that that's such a common question, but I'm glad that, like, it's going to sound weird, but I'm glad that people are asking those questions so that they can get the reassurance that it's okay.
Absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
It's better to ask than to, like, keep it, to yourself.
Right. And, I joined a lot of different, like, online groups and things like that when I did come to this realization, just because I was like, I just need to, like, see this community, and try to figure out if I have a place in it. And I'm so glad that people were asking those questions, because I wasn't brave enough to do it myself yet, but seeing other people ask gave me the courage to step into my own truth.
Definitely. And so this was, like, really recently, I guess.
Yeah. We're talking like maybe probably about 6 months ago is when it occurred to me.
Wow.
And so, I spent a month or two just kind of sitting with it, trying to figure out, like, okay, is this, am I just confused? Is this just curiosity? Like, what's going on inside my own head before I try to address it or deal with it? I need to sort of sort everything out in there. But then one night, my husband and I were hanging out at home. I had a couple extra drinks, and I kind of blurted out, like, just completely blurted out, I think I like girls too. It was just super abrupt and random. And he just kind of looked at me. He's like, okay. And of course, his first concern is, well, what does that mean in our relationship? Like,
sure, of course.
What are you trying to tell me here? So, the first step was reassuring him that like, no, I this doesn't change anything with us. I don't have any desire to leave. I don't identify as a lesbian. I'm very happy in our marriage. I'm still attracted to you too. So this is not necessarily going to put a strain on our relationship.
Right.
But he's the person I trust most in the whole world. Like, what if he rejects this part of me? What if he makes fun of me? Not that he would. He has never given me any indication that he would do something like that. But anxiety is a bitch. Yeah. And ultimately his response was like, okay, great. So what do we do? Where do we go from here?
Very supportive.
Yes, extremely so. And that actually led to a lot of other changes in our dynamic in our relationship. So the first thing that he started doing, because he'd had a lot more experience finding these types of things online than I ever had, he introduced me some different porn, and we watched, he was trying to help me see like, okay, what is it that you like that's happening here? What are you attracted to? Like, maybe exposure will help me sort out my own brain.
Sure.
That is still really hard for me. So when we go back to this concept of owning sexuality, I struggle so much to be able to speak about sexuality and to address it. So we're sitting here and I am like curled up into myself, all tense and tight, just staring. And he's like, are you okay? What's going on? Can you talk to me about this? And I'm like, I can't because I don't know how to say anything.
Just totally frozen.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's where therapy comes in. I've been in therapy for many, many years, dealing with, the family issues I mentioned, depression, anxiety, ADHD, all that good stuff. And
Relate.
yeah, it's therapy. Seriously, highly, highly recommend. I cannot stress enough.
Yep.
Yes, 100,000 times yes.
Everybody needs it. If you think that you don't, you probably need it the most.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hate the stigma of seeking assistance for mental health issues, but owning that and being willing to do the work to help yourself is the best decision you can ever make for yourself.
Yep. 1,000%.
Yeah.
I love your story. I love the beginnings of it. I love that it's such a good example of a relationship that's good. You are feeling this thing deep inside of you, and like best case scenario, you got, right? And like it's not surprising that you did. You're in a very like healthy and loving relationship with somebody who supports you. But just I can only imagine what it felt like to have that conversation and then just to have all of those fears and that anxiety just like completely washed away.
Yeah, it was so freeing. And that's been another really important piece of this for me, is that I don't feel like I'm hiding anything. I feel completely loved and accepted for the entire person that I am, not just the pieces that I put out there. And I'm very, very lucky to be in such a healthy and loving relationship. I have my husband's support 1,000% in everything in life. And I know that can be really rare.
Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't, but
yeah. And it's been great because it also helps me move past that same anxiety of like, is my relationship really this good? What if he changes his mind? Like, he knows everything. What's he going to change his mind on now? All of a sudden?
Yeah, he's in it. It's done. Okay, well, so porn. Have you tried other types of porn, like audio porn or like written porn, like literotica?
Not yet. I am still trying to find different things to explore. I've read many, many, many romance novels. I love love stories. Like, I just love love. So, outside of like what's in those, I haven't been exposed to too much yet. But that said, it's definitely on the list of things that I'm going to start exploring a little bit and kind of trying to find my way through.
Definitely. I feel like it's just a little like, let's be honest, most porn isn't made for women.
Right.
or people who have vaginas. Like it's for the male gaze primarily.
Right.
And it's all fantasy and just not as realistic. And I find that I don't know, the written porn is just a little like softer, and audio porn is just a little more realistic. And I also like nubile films. That porn is very kind of sultry and sexy rather than like kinky or like really intense. So that's kind of one of my go-tos, I guess I would say.
That's awesome. I'm all about looking up new stuff and kind of introducing it. I feel like I've just like been thrown into this ocean of a world I didn't know existed.
Oh
and
yeah.
So I'm just trying to find my way around.
Yeah, it's I think that exploration, that's the fun part, right? Like I've said to my partner that sometimes I don't know why we haven't done it yet in the pandemic. Like this is the perfect time to do it, but just like to like take an entire Saturday and just like not leave bed and just try a bunch of new things. Like see, I don't know, just see, you know? So exploration's like, I don't know, the best part. It's so fun.
It is absolutely fun. And I got to tell you, after, 15 years together, it's nice to have a whole bunch of fun new stuff to start exploring. It definitely helps your relationship feel fresh and new.
Yeah. And it's not to say that like, the sex was bad or anything like that. It's just to say that when you are with somebody for a long period of time, you kind of figure out what makes them tick. And with a lot of emotional intimacy, the kind of allure, the sexy intimacy kind of, I think, can disappear. So
absolutely. Yeah, it's
cool.
There's never an issue when you're trying to, have a different dynamic than you've had for that long, because eventually, even if it's good, it's still it's still the common experience. It's still the same thing it usually is, unless you actively try to make it something different.
Definitely. So, okay, you started out with porn. Well, first you had the discussion, obviously, which went amazingly.
Yeah.
Started off watching porn. What else have you guys been, and only share as much as you want to, but what else have you guys kind of been playing with? And has he been able to kind of come out with some of his fantasies, I guess, or desires?
Yes, and that's been a huge talking point. I feel like I talk about sex now more than I ever imagined I would in my entire life. And it's like almost daily, or at least a couple times a week, we're having these conversations. Even if we're not following through or doing anything about it, like we're talking about it, we're sharing, we're communicating, and that in and of itself has been like really, really nice. So, but one of the other big things that we've kind of talked about and found that we both get a lot of enjoyment out of is power play. So, my husband was worried about this kind of thing as well, again, just because of my history and my family background. But we decided to kind of try out this power dynamic a little bit. I'm very, very much the submissive type, and I'm very comfortable in that role. I like not having to make decisions. I like not having to overthink everything, which is what I tend to do.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. When it kind of is like, and that's what you do in your normal day-to-day life. In the bedroom, you want the exact opposite experience.
Exactly. And it's also very, very attractive to me when he takes control and I don't have I love it. It's been a lot of fun. So that has been another really big change. And, me being me, I researched it a ton first. But knowledge is power. So that has been kind of a fun learning curve that we're kind of experimenting with.
Really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it. And he is too, which is really nice, because that was something he was also very interested in. But in trying to be respectful of, my trauma and my history, he didn't ever want to push me and re-traumatize me, basically, or trigger any PTSD. So it was simultaneously like so sweet and romantic that he was thoughtful enough to consider that. but it's also been a lot of like exciting fun to experiment and move forward with that role. So we have definitely been pursuing that. If anybody is interested in looking into that a little bit more, I did read a book. I bought it on Amazon called How to Be a Healthy and Happy Submissive. It is by Kate Kinsey. And, outside of what I could just generally find on the internet, I found that to be a really well researched and really like clear overview of what that looks like. And it definitely just kind of helped me figure out my own headspace. I did kind of have a reaction after one session where I had no idea why. I couldn't understand, but I was crying, and I just felt like I was really upset all of a sudden. There wasn't anything that should have been triggering or anything that should have been a problem for me, but I just had this really strong emotional reaction, and reading through her book kind of helped me to piece that together, that like, oh, this happens sometimes and that's okay. It's relatively normal. Here are some things you can do, with your partner or on your own to try and mitigate that strong response.
And what's some of the advice on that front, like specifically?
Yeah. So like, and some of it is super simple stuff that absolutely makes sense. Like if your partner is there cuddling, talking through everything, definitely having that communication session afterwards saying, hey, how are you feeling? Are you okay? If not, let's talk about it. Let's address those things. Just having your voice heard can be very helpful in those moments.
Yeah.
The snuggling and the cuddling, just that like, let's calm down, take it down a notch, just spend some time together, so that we can kind of slowly ease out of that headspace into a normal environment again. If you're on your own, some of the things you can do are just like take a nice bath, have a glass of wine or whatever you like to drink, just things that mellow you out, help calm you down. If you have a friend with whom your relationship would allow, have that conversation with them. If your partner can't or won't do it, have that friend ready to go and help you kind of debrief and decompress.
Yeah, that's all good stuff. Communication's such a big part of like sex in general, but especially when you're playing with those power dynamics, I think, I think that we kind of touched on this before, but it's this idea of feminism and being a submissive, and, how do those two things fit together?
Yeah, I struggled with that for sure, because I liked this idea, but then mentally I'm like, okay, but, being told what to do, being treated, depending on like how you play it, if you're into any of that sort of, oh gosh, word choice is totally fleeting me right now. But basically, if you're into the dynamic where you're being treated like, or called, a slut or a whore or something like that, which is totally fine. But how do you reconcile that with the real world, and that those things are not okay?
Right.
And the book actually did really help me kind of unpack that. And, some of the things that the author mentioned, that Kate Kinsey mentioned in the book that really stuck with me are number one, the submissive has all the power in this situation.
Yes.
All of it. Because literally with one single word, whatever your safe word is, one single word, everything stops.
Yep.
And that is, there's a lot of power to be had in that. So you're not necessarily completely giving up power. You're holding your own power. Additionally, in a setting like that, when it's consenting, when it is appropriate, and you're going to be treated with respect in general, those things they don't hold the same power.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And it's again, trust and communication. Like at the end of the day, that's your person who you're interacting with in this way. And, after the sex is over, you're in an even and balanced relationship.
Exactly. And that's one thing I think too, is like, no matter what happens in that moment, I know that my husband respects and loves me. And, even if he is degrading during our play session, it doesn't mean that he would ever degrade me as an actual person outside of, when we consent to involve that kind of thing.
Yeah, he sounds like a very enlightened guy too. Like, I think there are some people out there who are into it for the wrong reasons. But I like almost as like an excuse to be able to say those things to women.
Yeah.
But I love hearing about people doing it right. That's really incredible. And it also reminds me of while you were talking about like how it's the submissive that actually has all the power. It reminds me of one of my favorite plays of all time. That is like a dream role for me. I'm getting too old to play it now, but maybe not. Maybe not. But theater, who knows when it will come back. So,
Yeah, exactly.
I might be too old by the time, but it is called, let me make sure I'm getting the author's name right. It's called Venus and Fur. And it is based on, hold on, I'm going to pull up this information so that, okay. So Venus and Fur is a play by David Ives.
Okay.
And it's based on a novel by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. I'll put all this in the episode notes.
Yeah.
But the play, it's a 2-person play, and there's multiple layers to it. It's originally based on the novel, which is about sadomasochism. And it kind of explores that same dynamic. It's like a play within a play premise. And it kind of explores that dynamic between power play between man and woman, power play between dom and sub. It is a absolutely beautiful piece of art that I cannot recommend enough. Either reading it, there is a movie, I think it's on Netflix. I do have to caution people though. Roman Polanski did direct it, so if you have objections to, watching something with problematic people, that's just something to be aware of.
Right.
So, but it's so well done and so empowering.
I am so excited. I wrote that down for myself too. That sounds super, super interesting. So
yeah, it's, maybe there's even like a bootleg performance of the play online. They're doing that so much, I feel like, in COVID. So
yeah, that's true. I'll have to keep an eye out.
To find it. Okay, so power play dynamics. And I guess, so it started with coming out as bi to your husband. And again, you don't need to answer this if you don't want to. Have you discussed opening things up at all? I mean, obviously you did this so recently that you're working through so much right now. So I imagine if you had even talked about that, that would be something in the very, very far future.
Yeah. So we actually have had that discussion, and it's definitely something that is, on the table for later. So we've had a couple of different discussions about it. Now, I would say there's so many different layers to this, but I think one of the first things he really wants to do is take me to a strip club. I've never been.
I haven't either.
Right. And, he kind of just wants to see how comfortable I am in that dynamic, being around these women and how I handle that sort of sexually charged situation.
Sure.
Especially because, outside of the time I've been spending with him, that is something that I have struggled so hard with. I get so uncomfortable in sexual situations. So that's a really, I guess, soft introduction.
Yeah, I would say so.
Having another person around. That said, he has, in his just infinite kindness and understanding and patience with me, basically given me the go ahead to, if I get a little flirty with a cute girl, it's cool, no harm, no foul. Mainly he just wants to know what's going on. It should never be anything that, is hidden, because that's when it just becomes salacious and it's cheating, essentially. So we also talked about the possibility of maybe opening things up a little bit. He is definitely monogamous, and I think I am too, honestly. We also own a small business, and there are limitations you have to keep in mind with that. No matter how badly you want to be able to be very open about different things, I can imagine that being a struggle, and it wouldn't be fair to anybody else. It wouldn't be fair to anybody else in the relationship to not be able to be open about that. So we're pretty sure we're both pretty sure we're monogamous. But that said, open to the idea of maybe a threesome or something along those lines. Once the world is safe again, with time. The main thing is, just especially considering everything that I've been reading and all the research I'm doing, making sure that we are very, very upfront about what the situation is. So if we do invite anybody else, making sure that they understand it's, a temporary casual thing, not trying to be misleading in any way. And the last thing I want to do is hurt anybody else.
Sure. Yeah. That makes sense. Let's see. I have a couple more questions kind of about like your mindset in regards to all of this.
Yeah.
How did you push past all of, this fear and this anxiety that you had to talk about these things and express what you wanted both to yourself and, your partner?
I will say it's still not perfect. It's still a challenge sometimes. Some days are easier than others. I'm really grateful that you gave me the opportunity to talk with you and be a part of this, because this is partially, a really great way for me to do just that, to kind of push past those limits. One thing my therapist recommended that I do is just say dirty words when I'm by myself in the mirror, just out loud, whatever, but just trying to take away their power by repeating them. And even if I'm on my own, sometimes like I will just turn bright red. I will stumble over them. It's easier some days than others. The other thing is, and I don't necessarily offer this as a recommendation, but just one thing that I did is if I knew that my husband and I were going to be having those discussions or, maybe turning on a porn to watch or something like that, I'd have a couple of drinks just to take me out of my own headspace. I overanalyze everything.
Yeah, I know how that goes. And I've often said though, it's awareness, right? Like you're aware that that's why you're doing it. And yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
I even, if people want, when they come on to the podcast, I'm like, oh yeah, like if you're a little bit nervous, like if you do drink, have a glass of wine, like it's totally chill.
Yep, exactly. And it just takes the edge off a little bit. Nothing too crazy, just trying to like calm my nerves and make sure that I'm just not like, I don't want to think as hard as I normally think. I need a chance to kind of shut down just a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And kind of, and this was kind of goes into another question that I was going to ask you. Do you feel, because I kind of feel sometimes that there is such like a sharp divide between like my everyday non-aroused self and my sexual self. Do you feel like you have that same kind of dichotomy, and like what have you done to kind of bridge the gap between those two subsets, assuming that like me, you do have them?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I feel like I'm two different people. It's very, very weird. But I find that it's easier for me if I can compartmentalize those things rather than trying to just embrace both sides of myself all at once. I'm not there yet. And maybe that'll come in the future. I don't know. Like we mentioned, I'm really early on in kind of exploring all of these things. But that said, I definitely have figured out, I've looked at the different timing. Like, okay, obviously if I am working or something like that, then it's, it's not appropriate to like really address my sexual self. And I focus on being professional. I focus on my job. I love my job. It's great. But then once I clock out for the day, usually it's something simple, but it's like, if I am interested in maybe exploring that side of myself or just being a part of it, just starting myself off with like, maybe I find a TikTok accountant, and just watch a couple of her TikToks, or, just talking to my husband, or, since we've been experimenting with like the Dom sub stuff, maybe I'll put on one of my collars, and that is like a sort of tether to, okay, this is the space I'm in right now. This is my current headspace and where I'm at.
That's really good advice.
The collar's been really helpful in that, because it's definitely, and it's a clear signal between my husband and I. Like if that collar is on, he knows like I am there. I am in that mood. I'm ready to play. The other thing is I have kind of created a separate social media presence for each side of myself, because I have the one side that has to be so professional and put forward. This is more of an effort to protect my privacy than anything, but I do have sort of this secondary set of accounts that I use, to be able to address those things and not feel like, oh, well, I can't like this post, or I can't follow this person, or I can't be in this group. Because if somebody finds out, so I have these secondary accounts, and you know what? I do whatever I want, and it's great.
Yeah, I really do. That's been a really big, something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is I have this podcast, and it's like, why do I live in fear that my employer or, potential future employers could find it? I shouldn't. Like, I'm not doing anything illegal or awful. So I wish that stigma of, I get it, like sex is like private or whatever, but also like the internet, I don't know. It was easier for it to be private when the internet didn't exist. Now that the internet exists, it's everywhere, and we should be able to express that.
I agree. And it's a good thing, because with this extra exposure comes more information, comes more knowledge, and people are able to get the information they need to be safe, to be smart. One of the big, the phrase in the BDSM community is safe, sane, consensual. And the access to information makes it so much easier to do just that. But there is absolutely a huge stigma. And, because of the business I own, just like I mentioned earlier, like I can't have people putting that together with this other part of me. Like, they have to be separate.
Yep.
And, my full-time employer, like, I definitely don't need them knowing any of this or being involved in any way. So having the freedom of those secondary accounts, I think, is helpful, at least, the way the world is right now.
Yeah, and who knows if that, could change in future years, generations. But for now, especially I think as women, I think that it's a little easier for men to, it always has been, right? Like
always. Yep.
Sexually harassing women in the workplace since the beginning of time.
Exactly.
But it's less okay for women to express these more sexual parts of them.
Oh yeah. Even, talking about, like, I've come out to a couple of my friends, let them know, hey, I feel like sharing this with you, that I am bisexual. I just think you should know. And most of them are like, okay, great. You're you. I don't, I mean, like, I care, but I don't care,
Right.
I care because it's a part of you, but I don't care because it obviously changes nothing.
Right.
But I've had a couple who were like, why are you telling me this? Like, why do you feel like you need to own that? What does your sex have to do with anything? What does your sex life or sexuality have to do with anything? And it was a little discouraging, because I'm learning to kind of identify and be myself, and the people that I trusted, because I've really only talked to very, very few people. It felt dismissive, but I do feel like it is important, whether they care or not. I care. It is who I am. And again, just being able to embrace my entire self, not being limited to, we talked about the duality, not being limited to the person that everybody normally knows, but being able to kind of embrace the other half of me.
I love that. That's so important. And I think when we recorded like our first go around at this, I didn't know that it had been so recent. Like, I am so impressed that in a matter of, like you said, 6 months, that you've gone from thinking about this like so thoughtfully and philosophically, and then you communicated it effectively. I mean, it sounds like you and your husband are like a fucking dream team couple goals, but and then you've worked to implement it into your life and do the research, and I'm extremely impressed.
Thank you. That means a lot. I honestly, that's how I address anxiety. When I'm anxious about something, I'm like, let me just get this over with, or I'm just going to keep being anxious. So I sometimes move through things a little bit fast. I could be impulsive in that way, but it also,
I mean, you're not doing things unhealthily. It doesn't sound like. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but like it sounds like, even if it's fast, it sounds good. It doesn't sound unsafe or anything like that. So Yeah, I'm just very, very impressed and excited for you to see what comes next. And I know that things feel really limiting right now because of the pandemic, but
Yes.
I don't know, in some ways it's kind of nice to just kind of be introduced to this thing, just the two of you, and gives you something fun
Yeah.
to do at home.
Well, that's for dang sure. Oh my gosh, it's been crazy. We went from having sex maybe like a couple times a month to like several times a week at this point.
That's amazing.
It's been great. I'm loving my life right now. I'm happier than I've been in a long time, and not just because of that, not just because of the sex component, but honestly because I feel like I am really understanding who I am as a person better and growing into that person. And it took me a long time to be okay with that.
Yeah. No, definitely. I feel that. I relate to that. And I am proud of anybody who has fought through all of the discouraging things, all of the anxiety, all of the doubts to get to that place. So that's really incredible. I guess let's kind of end with two questions that kind of link together, which are what do you want listeners to take away from this? And is there any advice that you have for somebody who's struggling with the same thing?
Yeah, the most important piece of advice I can give, and what I really do want people to take away, is just embrace your identity in whatever way feels right to you. You don't need to worry about if you're invading someone else's space in your own identity. That's 100% not how this works. You are free to be who you are, and you should love who you are, because everyone is just so wonderful and perfect. And I want everyone to find that joy. And there is so much joy and freedom and excitement to be had when you learn to love yourself completely. And that's a hard thing to do, but it's a very worthwhile thing to do.
Definitely. Yeah, you've sold me.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I can't stress enough is just communicate. It's so much easier said than done. Like, if somebody had said that to me a year ago, I would have been like, yeah, okay, great. Thanks. That means nothing, because I still don't know how.
Right.
It's not easy. You definitely have to overcome your own fears, your own biases. It's a lot of work. But if you're willing to put that work in, even if you're just practicing on your own and then you bring it into your relationship, or, you start out by telling somebody that you trust something about yourself, that won't judge you. And then, you kind of share that or grow into it more. But communication is the only way you will ever get everything that you want. Like, it's the only option.
And I think too, like, communication doesn't mean that you always are perfect. It means that you can acknowledge to your partner, I don't think I'm saying this very well, or I'm worried that this is what you're going, like, it can be really transparent. I mean, it doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to like have everything figured out, you're both in it together. And if you're like a couple who has faith in one another and you always expect the best of one another, which I think is like one of the most important parts of being a successful couple.
Yeah.
If you have that faith that the other person always is doing their best, then it makes communicating a lot easier.
Yeah, I agree. Don't immediately expect perfection. I know I'm not alone in being the type of person who's like, no, if I don't do this right the first time, I don't do it at all. But it's a learning curve, and give yourself patience, give yourself the grace to grow and learn. But, start out as simply as you need to. Just take that first step. As long as you're trying, you will make progress.
Exactly. Well, is there any last points that you want to hit on, that you want to, any, I guess, resources you want to share with listeners? Any last little tidbits?
Yeah, just again, if you are interested in exploring that Dom sub dynamic, I again recommend Kate Kinsey's book, How to Be a Healthy and Happy Submissive. It was really, really helpful for me. There's obviously a ton of stuff online as well. And just whoever needs to hear this, just know that you are okay the way that you are. You don't need to be afraid that you're not good enough, because that is It's a fear it's not your own. And you will find so much more joy in life when you're able to accept that. And I know it's not something everyone can do right in this moment, but I just hope that everyone's able to find that.
I agree. Very, very well said. Well, Scarlett, thank you so much for coming on and for being vulnerable and sharing your story. I appreciate it, and I know that listeners will as well.
Oh, I appreciate you having me. Like I said, it was a great experience for me too, to help me continue to grow.
Yeah. Well, everybody, this has been Wine, Dine, and 69. I am your host, Rachel Dalton, here with my guest, Scarlett, and let's keep talking.